Hi, Sorendil here. This is my project Sprint4 demo for ist361. I've really got to rush through this. This is my 5th time recording this and it never ends up shorter than 15 minutes. So here we go. So if you remember last week, I was stuck here on these new features and I finished them, and then I also created some new backlog items to basically go back and clean up some stuff from my Sprint 3 code. And I did that because I didn't want to move on from it without fixing it, and also because some of what I'm doing is replicated in more new features or built upon, so I wanted it to be nice and functional just the way I wanted it to before I replicate it again. And then this backlog item I actually added while making one of the mini versions of this video, and yeah, it's just because I realized my charts are not as clear as they should be. And then I got to work on this a little bit, but because it's not complete and it looks really ugly, I'm not going to show it to you. But what it is, and you'll see it next week, is like a single coherent view theme that links all of my URLs together and makes it one coherent application. So let's get to looking at my code. I'm going to start with the changes I made to title stats. So this used to be a grid. And if you remember last week, I talked about how I was not happy with the grid because you would select things and then you would search for something and it would clear your selections. So now that doesn't happen, and like I had said, there's two grids here. What this is actually called is a twin column select, and it's a Vaadin built-in selection option. So I didn't have to do much of anything to make this. I just pulled in the Vaadin item and it worked, which is great. So that's what I changed here. I'll talk about it a little more when I get into my code. So let's look at genre sets. So I changed this to, this used to display each genre multiple times, and I changed just what table is used to populate this, and that fixed this right away. It was a very simple fix. I'm going to show you a little bit of data. Again, my data should not be trusted. I was gone for the weekend. I did not do any polls over the weekend. So yeah, I'm not set up on the cron jobs. I don't have my DigitalOcean server going, pulling this data in constantly. But it's still, there's a trend here that's interesting, and I'm not sure what's causing it. I thought maybe it was the Steam Summer Sale, but it turns out that that's not it. I think there must have been game releases or something, because while I was gone over the weekend, there were a bunch of big spikes for certain genres. Not sports, but you get the idea here. You see, yeah, see, there's some big spikes here, and I'm not sure what caused it. Just like, obviously Steam is generally experiencing more users, which I should probably put somewhere, like, maybe not on this screen, but somewhere, a total number of Steam users, average concurrent users for a date. But anyway, so I fixed that on my genre stats display. Now let's look at a new feature. So this is Landing stats, and this is the page where I realized I really need legends, because this data is confusing, and it's more confusing because my chart's not clear and it needs a legend. So for some reason, English is one of the lower values of daily average concurrent players by language. Well, that's not an accurate title at all. It should be daily average concurrent players by game supporting language. So what's actually happening here is almost every game on Steam supports English. Very few support Spanish. Even fewer support Italian, I would imagine, or Portuguese, Brazil. And so what this is actually showing you is that per game that supports Spanish, more players are playing it. And my guess as to why that is again the big publisher effect. Basically, big publishers can afford to add support to multiple languages. And with that come a whole bunch of lurking variables about advertising money and previous fans for series and stuff like that. So this view is really important to understand. This view does not mean there are 639 players per Spanish-speaking players per game that supports Spanish. This just means that games that support Spanish have this number of players. It doesn't mean they're Spanish speaking. But there are some, it's also interesting what languages don't follow that trend, and like Italian is one apparently, Arabic is one, and these games don't seem to to grow. I mean, it could just be noise in my data, essentially, like, for whatever reason, big publisher games came out and they didn't support these languages. But if this trend continues, it may mean something bigger about, like, what games publishers have decided to support, and could indicate some underserved markets, depending. Yeah, so there's a little bit of stakeholder potential use. The next one I'm going to show you is the one I am most excited about, and I've talked about this before, but that's because user tags, which is what this is, are by far the most dynamic and hardest and most underanalyzed, I would guess, method of dividing games up and analyzing them. Because with a user tag, when a user votes for a tag, not only are they saying this game is of this type, they're also saying implicitly, and to what degree they're saying this is variable, but to some degree they're saying, and I liked it or I played it. And so there's a lot of potential here to look at sort of what games generate lots of tags, what pools of players are interested in like tags, or pools of tags, essentially. There's a lot of potentially interesting information here that stakeholders could use, and some of it may be negative, like this one, like psychological horror. This, again, my data is not worth drawing for conclusions from, but if it was, you might be able to conclude from this, oh, if I'm making a psychological horror game, I shouldn't be looking to distribute it on Steam. So anyway, that's just an example of how this data could be used, and I would love to talk more about sort of why I'm excited about user tags, but I just don't have time. I keep going way over time on this video, so yeah, that's way better. Okay, let's show you my code. So let's start with length sets. So this is sort of a raw new feature. I didn't have any of, well, I had a little bit of this code written, but I had to rewrite almost all of it because of a small change. But basically, genre, language, and title all work this way. The code looks almost identical except like a find replace for languages and titles. So what's happening here is this query, this is the database utility for languages, for the language stats, I should say. And this query here shows all languages in the database. And it's used to populate that twin column select. And then this query here searches for a language based on the name, which is pulled from that column select. And I could probably do an exact matching here. I probably don't need this because, again, the value is being pulled directly from my database, so it is going to match exactly. But anyway, so what happens here is this works just like it did last week, pretty much. It builds that twin column select. It used to be a grid, twin column select now. It builds it, it puts the captions on it, and then whenever it adds this event listener, whenever that's altered, whenever the selections are altered, it updates the chart. This update grid method can go away. I just need to do that, which I need to get rid of this method call, get rid of the function, put this code right here. It's never called again, so it doesn't need to be. It's showing all the languages in my database. If there was a database pull and the database changed, but again, because this method's never called again, you still wouldn't see it. You would need to refresh the page to see that change in its current state. So there's no reason to have this, but yeah. So then it creates the chart. Again, it's creating the chart every time you change selections, which I'm not happy about, but it doesn't seem like there's a better way to do it. And it tells it what the y-axis is. Again, this is a data provider, which is converted to a data provider series, because charts display series data. Most charts do. You don't have to do this for all charts, but series charts, which is what I'm showing you, a time series chart. So it's actually a line chart just with a time value on the x-axis, so it is a time series chart, but in Vaadin it's just a line chart. And so yeah, like I said, x-axis is the stat date, and y-axis is the number of players. This is poorly named. It should be language average conc players, but that's because of the name of the column. jOOQ pulled straight from the database and created this name. So that's my fault. I just didn't name it correctly in the database. Yeah, and so then it throws the twin column select and the chart on the vertical layout and displays the layout. Done. All of them are like this except for this one, and that's the title one, and that's because of the search function that I allow with the text field. And that threw a wrench in my plans a little bit. And so what's happening when you type in that search bar is actually that my database is being queried for that search value. So you're looking for you're searching by title, it's querying the title, it's querying the games, and looking at their titles and finding a match, any matches, and returning them. That's probably not how it should function. How it should function is much more shallow than that. Since I'm already pulling all of the games out of my database, what should be happening there is it should just be hiding them, but keeping them in the list, but hiding the games that don't match your search. There is a Vaadin interface, a filter interface for that, but I couldn't get it to work. So it still functions that way, and what then happens is kind of wonky. Not super happy about it. What happens is that twin column select, I need to rename this to update twin column TCS, but that twin column select, the searches are added to a list of games. The reason it comes back as a list is because that's what jOOQ supports in its results, but then I convert that list to a set because basically if you use a list and you delete your search parameters, you'll get duplicate values, but a set will prevent duplicate values from entering the set when you add them. So if you tell a set to add a value and that value is already there, set will just say no. Set will just skip it, which is great. So I just converted it to a set, which is what TCS.getSelectedItems returns anyway is a set. So it already made sense to use sets. So I just did it that way. But what this does is this checks to see if there were selected items right here. And then it adds those selected items to this thing called selection set. And it seems silly to do this, right? Because then I'm just adding that selection set to the games. But then I'm setting the items in the twin column select to those games. So now what's happening is, you don't see this because something else happens, but what's happening is your results are in the left column of selection set of the twin column select, and so are your selections. And then this code, if there were selections, moves those selections back to the right column, using this item right here, which is why I didn't just directly add them to games. So yeah, that's kind of wonky, pretty ugly if you ask me, but that's sort of the way I made it work. And then the same thing happens here though. It pulls the time series data per title and shows it on the chart, and then the only other difference is this filter.focus, which is setting the focus to my text field. And the reason it's like that is because if I don't do that, what happens is whenever this so you see that little refresh right there? See that right there? Whenever that would happen, you would lose focus on this field. And so if it happened while you were typing, let's say I'm typing something really long, you would just not be able to type. It would just take the focus away. It felt pretty ugly, I thought. So, so that's how this page changed. And again, I'm not that happy about it, but it is what I did. Any other things? Oh, yeah. So, I had a couple of other... let's see. I appreciate the feedback, Robert, on making this look nicer, the hierarchical SQL queries. I definitely tried to do that where I could. I think there's still a couple places where I need to go back and fix that. But yes, I definitely agree that it doesn't look good as one long SQL query. So I tried to fix that. And then I got feedback from the professor on my view and adding a virtual column. Unfortunately, PostgreSQL doesn't really support virtual columns. What I could have done is created a stored procedure, which then I could have included in my view, so it would have been functionally the same thing, I think, as a computed or virtual column. But while I was implementing that, I actually found an even better solution, an even simpler solution, I should say, and not necessarily better. But what wrong with my code previously was I was aliasing this, some daily average conc letters. But of course, because that alias was in the select statement, I couldn't reference it anywhere, including in the select statement, because that's executed last. You can only execute select aliases in the order by statement. But instead, I aliased this subquery more specifically. And what this subquery does is it counts the number of games, in this case, the number of games that belong to a certain user tag. And so, and then instead of aliasing this, I just divided by this alias and gave it its own alias. And now that column returns automatically. So instead of having to have a view on top of a view, I just have a single view. It actually no longer displays this. I guess I could make it display this by just, doing this basically. But, yeah. So now I only have a single view for genre, language, and user tag. I don't need a view on top of a view or a virtual column. So that's nice, and I appreciate that feedback. And trying to pursue that solution led me to this one. So it was very helpful. Thank you. And I think that's it for me today. Yeah, I'm still over 15 minutes, but significantly less than last time. So I hope you guys enjoyed that. I hope I covered everything. And I'll see you guys next week for my final presentation. Good luck to you, Robert, and hope you guys are having a good week.